afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Loxton Research Centre and Think Lab Loxton for the second in our series of seminars on a range of subjects that focus on regional business growth. My name is Noel Lindsay, and I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor for Entrepreneurship at the University of Adelaide and the Dean of Business at the Adelaide Business School. First up, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the First Peoples of the River Murray and Maori regions as the traditional custodians and First Nations people of the land on which we live today. And we pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to the other First Nations people who are present today. A big welcome as well to you, our audience, who have joined us here in person, and also to our online audience. Governments. Semmer, sitting next to me here, Belinda over the other side, and Colin right there, and two others who have just driven up from Adelaide, Dr. Jill Thomas, and Joel Abraham. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our panellists in a minute, but today, just to set the scene, as we go here to hear about family business. But what is family business? It does mean different things to different people. Maybe you've not really thought about it much, but there are different views on what is a family business. And I'd just like to give a couple of insights into what some people say a family business is. Some would say that a family business is definitely where the family owns all the shares, all the equity in the business, or at least a substantial part of that equity. However, there are others who say, no, that's not correct. Ownership doesn't matter. It's about control. Does the family control the business? If you go down this route, you'd actually have to say that News Corp would be a family business because it's controlled by the Murdoch family. And then there's another group of thinking that goes along the lines of, no, it's about the intentions. It's about the intentions of whether the current owners want to hand it past it to the next generation there. And that's what constitutes or distinguishes a family business from a non-family business. Whatever the interpretation or understanding that you have, there's no doubt that while business is complex anyway, family business is the most complex form of business there is. Why do I say this? Well, in family business, not only are there the normal forms of governance built around ownership, management, and the board of directors, there's also what I call the family dynamic, There may be other terms for this. And what is this? Well, to me, it's what is core to the family. It's what separates one family from another, what distinguishes one family from another there, what makes it work, and so on. And this can involve a whole range of different artifacts or whatever, things along the lines of the family values, to the extent that they permeate the business, family structure, its history, its culture, the way things are done in the family relationships, etc. And so when family is overlaid, the family dimension is overlaid the business dimension. Sometimes there are trade-offs in a family business that don't exist in a non-family business. And so it's important to understand why family businesses are so complex, more complex than non-family businesses, because it's where the intersection of family and business come together, and this fuels the complexity in businesses that are run by families. Now, COVID-19 has caused disruption to the business model of many family businesses across a range of sectors. And we've got a few represented here today. More than ever, business families need to work together to make the most of new opportunities so that they can survive and thrive in the medium to short term. Business growth and how to achieve it may be a point of contention for current business family leaders and those who are waiting for the leadership baton to be passed to them. Sometimes there's tensions there to the next generation saying, please let me take over and run the business because I've got some different ideas there. And so this can cause some tensions there. However, can I say that research by the Family Business Education and Research Group in the Business School at Adelaide University shows that family businesses can foster long-lasting entrepreneurial spirits, but not avoiding, but embracing the intergenerational family tensions. And so, to flesh out some of the key issues associated with family enterprise, including the unique tensions that can develop with family businesses, I'd like to introduce you to our panel today, who will talk about these sorts of things and I'm sure many others. Now, in no particular order, we've got first up Dr. Jill Thomas. Jill, put your hand up, Jill over there. Jill is the Director of Family Business Australia and a visiting research fellow at the University of Adelaide. Jill has a particular interest in the professional management of family-owned businesses, particularly those businesses in the small to medium-sized enterprise sector. In her research into family business, Jill's explored a whole range of different things, including the decision-making type processes that occur in family businesses, the perception of family business leaders about the role of non-family managers in businesses, particularly in the area of finance. She's also looked at communication processes with their family business, as well as investigating issues relevant to boards and governance of small to medium-sized family enterprises. Jill is co-founder of the Family Business Education and Research Group in the University of Adelaide's Business School. Next, we have Jenny here. Jenny Semmer. Jenny is the co-founder and director of 919 Wines, which she established together with her husband in 2002. Originally, Jenny qualified as a pharmacist and a winemaker, and Jenny oversees the client liaison, marketing, bottling, and administration activities of their company. Jenny has always contributed to her community, serving on the Riverland Wine Show Committee, and is involved with Food Riverland and the Riverland Tourism Association. She's been active with the Riverland Wine PR and Marketing Development Group and has served as a director on the board of Destination Riverland. Jenny was awarded the Australian Women in Wine Awards Owner-Operator of the Year in 2016 and the Riverland Wine Industry Person of the Year in 2019. Next we have Belinda on the far side over there. Belinda is the dealer principal for the Riverland Mazda and Rosenthal Mitsubishi franchises at Rosenthal Automotive, and she's done this since 2016. Belinda holds a Bachelor of Management in Marketing, and she gained significant experience working as a business manager for several major Adelaide dealer groups. After completing the Commonwealth Bank's Net Leader Management Program in 2007, Belinda worked at Asanda, where she managed, trained and developed over 150 business managers at a variety of dealer groups across Western Australia, and this is where she met and married her husband, Andrew. In 2012, Belinda came back and joined the family business to enable her dad and her uncle to retire, and this meant she's the fourth generation of the Rosenthal family to run the business since 1908, along with her husband, Andrew, and her young brother, Ben. Next we have Joel. In the blue shirt, Joel Abraham. Joel, along with his brother, have successfully grown the family business, the Australian Institute of Business, to become the largest MBA provider in Australia and one of the largest private higher education institutions in Australia. Highlights associated with Joel's involvement with the family business include, from when he started, increasing the revenue by more than 50 times, 50 times from when it was. And he did this in a short period of time. He's produced in the family more than 10,000 MBA graduates, an incredible number. He's built a successful transnational operation with a distribution network across Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. And he's grown the company to have over 275 full-time staff in Adelaide with several hundred contractors. Joel has a Bachelor of Commerce and an International Certificate in Corporate Finance from Columbia University in the USA. Last, and not certainly by least, we have Callum Bender. Welcome, Callum. Callum is a local. He's born and bred in Renmark, Pruning. He finished school at the end of year 11, so did I, and started a carpentry apprenticeship at age 17 which he completed in 18 months. Callum then started Aristo Coffee 9 years ago as a hobby, and he, along with his wife Laura, now have a cafe and retail outlet in the Renmark fire station. And they've created a flagship cold drip coffee product using traditional Japanese cold drip techniques using state-of-the-art computer-controlled brewing equipment from the USA. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our distinguished panel. Okay, so the format I intend adopting is that I'll certainly ask our panel of experts here some questions. But if you feel the urge to actually ask some questions as we go, by all means do so. If you just put your hand up, and if you want to continue on a particular line of thinking, and there'll certainly be time for questions at the end. So starting up first. By the way, panel, I've changed all the questions around, so I'm going to be asking you a different question than what I originally told you was going, just to keep you on your toes. Not so. Jill, first up, can I ask you, you've had a strong interest in professionalising family businesses there. What does that mean? And why is this so important, professionalising a family business?
Well, traditionally, I suppose family businesses have been renowned for their flexibility approach, their spontaneity of decision making, their patient capital, their longevity, their desires to keep going. But that doesn't mean that they don't need organisation and structure. And it doesn't mean that something like ThinkLab can't be very useful, because part of professionalising a business is obviously identifying your strategy or just the way you want to do things, your operational direction. And ThinkLab has been able to, or can provide the environment to help you do some of that rethinking and reviewing. The other aspect is with the development of the next generation. As we know, children that might come into the business, children who are already working in the business, need some time to spread their wings, perhaps think up some new concepts where they will take the business in the future, and they're able to do that in the environment of ThinkLab without someone, or even the perception of mum and dad or uncle or aunt looking over their shoulder. So that's basically what I think why it's very useful to have something like this in topic-wise in your series. You asked about what is professionalisation. You want me to explore that right now? How long's a piece of string? Professionalisation of businesses, generally at the large end, we would focus, as you've mentioned, Noel, when you're defining family business, on two aspects. The governance aspect, so what governance structure do we need? Do we need a board or an advisory board? If we have a board, do we want external members? The sorts of things that you read about. The other aspect is communication channels. They're either communication documents, such as a charter for the family, or a constitution for the business, and also those communication channels, or basically the most important part of that is the process to get to identifying what communication channels you've got. I knew a business recently who had spent 4 years on developing a family charter, had multiple shareholders, there were potential conflicts, there was creative tension, but the 4 years was really well spent, even though they didn't sign that document in the end, because they worked out all the expectations they had of each other, etc. So that was invaluable. So in terms of professionalisation for the larger organisations, that's important. For the smaller organisations, really professionalisation is getting your house in order. It's not simple, but it's as simply expressed as that, of getting your house in order. One wise family business CEO once said to me, my mindset is I'm going to sell the business next year. He had no intention of selling the business, but his mindset was that, because he knew then he would get his house in order and do his due diligence and have the systems and processes in place that would enable it to appeal to somebody if he had that mindset. So that was a really, I thought, a good way of putting it. And his systems and processes included very open and transparent communication channels with family and non-family. Your employees, as well as your family, are a really important part of that wider family. So he did well from having that mindset. basically, professionalisation is there to help us balance between that family system you talked of, Noel, based more on the emotions, and the business system where we're focusing on our profit and our competitors and how we're going to do better in the marketplace. So it's that balance we need. Professionalising helps that.
And Jill, if I can just pick up on, you talked about a family constitution. You know, I'm a very strong advocate for developing a business plan, a strategic plan, and you know, over the next 3 to 5 years, with looking to create the future. And I know many businesses may not have a business plan, and that's the reality. And probably even fewer businesses, that are family businesses, would have a family constitution there, or whatever you want to call it. And this is quite an incredible document, particularly where there's an intention to pass the business down to future generations, how the founders, or whatever generation, wants to communicate to the future generation what this business is about, the fundamental values and so on. Could I ask you just to elaborate, you know, what would be the process of developing a family constitution, and how long is it, you know, how big should it be, and what should it cover, and those sorts of things? I know how long's a piece of string, Jill, but I mean, just briefly.
You got any lawyers in the room? Okay, I can speak freely. Obviously, the lawyers have different views. For example, they'll say that you can't have a family constitution, you'll have a business constitution, but the family, it might be a charter or a document. And as I've said, it's the process of discussing that that's more important. The actual constitution can be, obviously, an incredibly complicated and long process. The multi-generation family businesses and those with multiple shareholders find that really, really important, because it does set out those expectations. And it's all very well to say we'll set them out, and I could give you a pro forma today and it'll have a number of things in it. When do we want the children to come into the business? Do we want them to have had prior experience? Do we want them to have had a university or tech trade education? Whatever it is. It's all very well to say you put those in, but discussing what you mean by that, what each of you share by that, when you've got multiple shareholders, and one I discussed recently with someone who was going through it, they've got 50 shareholders. Not many of them work in the business, and they're all through Australia, 2 are overseas. So you can imagine having that discussion and deciding what to put in that. It's all very well, you've got the legal bits that the lawyers will help you with, and you've got the other aspects which are going to guide your expectations. So great process to go through, and terrific, and if you are multi-generational with multi-shareholders, I'd certainly recommend that you do that sooner rather than later, before you have an issue.
Yeah, and the more generations that we get to in the family business, the more complex it becomes. As you said, we start off with the vision of the founders, which could be mum and dad, it could be 2 uncles, you know, a brother and sister or whatever, and then they pass the business down to their children. The sibling partnership then is formed there, and so there's a little slightly extra addition to complexity there, because the children then have to interpret what mum and dad or what their you know, the other family members were thinking about. But then the complexity really gets ramped up when you get to the 3rd, 4th, 5th generations and beyond there, where we have what's called the cousin consortium there, because as Jill alluded to just before, that you can have like some of the family members, some of the cousins may just want to get out of the business, and they say, just pay me out, give me some money, give me the money. I don't want to be in wine, or I don't want to be in engineering, or whatever it is. I want to go and do my own thing. I want to set up a clothing store or something like that. And yet there'll be others who will want to stay in that business there and develop it. So complexity can arise there. And of course, overriding that is, you know, who should the baton be passed to? Who should own future generations of the family business? Should it be the partners or family members, or should it only be bloodline members of the family there? So this increases the layers of complexity there. So moving to Joel. Joel, you've had a successful career in developing up the Australian Institute for Business. Can I ask, first of all, how did you get involved in this? What was the trigger for you getting involved?
Yeah, sure.
So, was your mum and dad set the business up?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
they did. So I joined the organisation in 2004, 2005, just after I graduated. So it's all that I knew. There was no, big plan for me to join the organisation. It was just a natural progression. I was doing part-time work there when I was undergoing my degree in business, and then I stepped into it. So that's really the story of how I joined the organisation.
Okay, Joel.
I transitioned though, I stepped into an organisation that was small and struggling as a break-even style business, and needed to really roll up the sleeves and get my hands dirty straight away. And there was a wonderful opportunity to build my skills and take on a leadership role in the organisation right from an early stage, just because of the dynamics with my parents, who were, started to step away from the organisation in terms of an active day-to-day, and that then freed up the position of sort of joint CEO my brother and I took on to be able to take control of the organisation and then lead it forward.
And so what were the benefits to you, Joel, of working in the family business?
Yeah.
How did
So,
you benefit?
I mean, there's many benefits as there is some disadvantages as well, I think, right?
Sure.
So I think the first benefit that I might touch on is just the benefit of alignment. As you all know in business, and those online know in business, it's lonely at the top, right? And employees come and go, right? They have different career paths. They have to move interstate, overseas. They have families. They transition, and it's nice to know that you've got a group of people there that's with you in the exact same position that you're in, right? They're in the same financial position. They've got the same upside. They've got the same downside if things go pear-shaped as well. So that alignment is really important. It's kind of why, now that I've transitioned out and we have a new CEO, we equitise that whole management team as well, so that if we make money, we make it together. If we lose, we'll lose it together as well. So I think alignment is crucial, and that is inherent with having a family business. I'd say the second benefit might be around culture, and we use culture of the family business. One of the big things I read employees when I left was 275. So, how did you maintain that? There was some strategies, and it was very intentional to ensure that. But what we found was we had a specific segment of the market, the working or the potential employees, that were drawn to and gravitated towards a family style business, no matter the size. They like the culture, they like the values, they like the homely feel, no matter how big it was. So we found that to be beneficial as well. And maybe the last I'll just touch on is around professional opportunities. I'm very grateful to AIB, although I gave blood, sweat and tears, and there was a lot of down I wouldn't have the opportunity to do, right? Of seniority, because when you join a traditional organisation, you're put in as a junior and you have to work your way up and improve your stripes and all that sort of stuff, whereas this was being thrown into the deep end every day. So your ability to pick up things and experience things and try new things and visualise and have a vision of something and then go and implement it the next day is just something that you're not able to do in a traditional organisation, that you're not an owner or an heir to.
Thanks, Joel. Thank you very much. Can I switch to Jenny? Jen, can I ask you, I'm intrigued by the name 919 Wines. If I said that correctly, is it 919 or 919? Where did the name come from?
It is 919.
Right.
So
yeah.
when we commenced our business, we were looking for a brand name that expressed place.
Yes.
And we started our brand in a time when everyone was kangaroos, lizards and koalas, and that just, we knew that was a fashion.
Yes.
And the other sense of place would have been Berry or Glossop or Riverland. We couldn't use Riverland, of course, because it's what they call a geographic indication.
Yes.
But we did it. We sacrificed many bottles of wine, and finally ended up with the brilliant idea that we should look up what our title is, because it doesn't get much more specific than that. So section 919,
right.
100 of Berry, county of Hamley, South Australia. That's
where you're located.
That's where we're located. That's the original
Okay.
vineyard that we purchased. So,
Okay.
what we didn't know at the time, or didn't even think of at the time, was it puts us to the top of alphanumeric lists. And we were the first brand to have numbers instead of letters
Yes.
in our name. And what we didn't even visualise and didn't know for about 11 years is it actually has a meaning in Chinese. And in
Nine's
Chinese,
a very lucky number.
well, 919, if you say it in Mandarin, it's and anyone who speaks Mandarin, please excuse me, it's zhou yao zhou, which means roughly throw wine at me.
Right.
We figure it was meant to be.
Yeah. I love it, Jenny. I love it. So, Jenny, you've built a very successful business after coming up with that great name. So, resilience. I mean, how have you built resilience into your business? And you know, you've grown, and I guess these are challenging times, but you're going on to do some great things.
So we've done a number of things. First of all, we tried to diversify our income base from within the industry. So instead of just being grape farmers or just being winemakers, we then tried to build a distribution network. Now, we're not distributors, but we've tried to build alliances with good, solid distributors. So we've got distribution in certain parts of the country and certain parts of the world, but not others. We have, for about 10 years at least, we've been concentrating on developing a really robust internet business, because we realise that we can't reach everywhere all the time, and so, but the internet does.
Yes.
So we put a lot of effort in for about 10 years, and I will say that stood us very well when suddenly everyone was staying home, it's home safe. And then we opened our cellar door outlet, which has given us a retail outlet.
Yes.
We took on contract winemaking to use up spare capacity and also to provide an alternative income stream, because being in an agricultural business, you end up with a variable harvest from year to year. And also we were doing projections of what our stock requirements would be, so we would alter how much we make from year to year according to those stock projections and sales projections. So contract winemaking uses up capacity and provides income stream. We've managed to build a very stable client list there of high quality clients who have got a clear vision of what they want. They're very responsive when we ask them to provide us with information to help build their brands, but we also provide a little extra support because not everyone has the experience that we've got.
Right.
So we try to, it's sort of like a semi-mentoring role there.
Yep.
So we've diversified the income base there. We sell our excess grapes now, and we're getting a higher than regional average price for those. We have taken on an advisory board. We meet irregularly, I will say, but it's good to have an outside perception to help us reflect on where we're going and what we're doing and how we should get there. So I think we've done a lot of work in a lot of areas over a long period of time.
No, I can see that, Jenny. I mean, the advisory board, that can be a little bit scary, I think, because, you've got the business is yours, it's the family business there, and I presume when your advisory board involves externals, people outside the family who are maybe providing some advice to you about your business, would that be correct?
We have always tried to have one of the children on the advisory board.
Yes.
We now know that they will never come into the business, so that's fine, but at least that keeps them involved.
Yes.
And because they've got various skills in business or governance or accounting, law, what have you,
Yes.
it helps them to give advice from within a sphere where they're familiar with what goes on.
Yes.
We have two other people. We always try and include someone much younger than us.
Yeah.
Because we're old farts and we need a fresh perspective. And we have people with other experience in life. So we do try to rotate our advisory board to keep it fresh.
Yes.
As I said, we meet irregularly. We actually are probably due for a meeting as we speak. But no, it's about shining the spotlight internally to make sure that we have got a sensible vision, a sensible strategy, and that what we do is going to build a good and robust business.
Yes. Yes. Okay. The well, I mean, you've done a lot of work on your business. That's for sure. It's you haven't just been complacent there in building a resilient business.
Look, we've always had a strategic plan ever since we started.
Yes.
And that has been to make sure that the business succeeds, because we don't just have skin in the game, we have the whole carcass.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. Callum, can I ask you a question, please? So, you've had an interesting background, and often with family businesses, they're made up of family members of people you can trust there, which is one of the great attributes, I think, of having a family business. So when you go into business with your partners, you can trust them, or hopefully you can, being family members. We each bring different things to the business with having different backgrounds and that, though. Can I ask you, like with yourself and your wife Laura,
Yep.
how did your backgrounds contribute to where you are now? Because you dropped out of school and did an apprenticeship as a carpenter.
Yep.
There. I dropped out of school and did an apprenticeship as a tailor originally myself. There. And so it's kind of interesting where you've ended up now with the Rosto coffee.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I guess my background as a builder by trade, you're a rough man on the job. If you had an idea in your head, you'd always jot it down on a piece of timber and take that back to the office. Then Lauren, my wife, she's a physio by trade, so she's on the other side of the scale where I guess she's worked in the government, in the private sector. So she's very much used to, dotting all the I's, crossing the T's, a legality side as well. And I guess I had that legality side as well with building with building structures that have to be safe and sound. So we had to tick that box as well. So I guess combining those two strengths together, I've come into the coffee business with a very much a hands-on, physical manufacturing approach. When Lauren's come in with I guess very calm. I'm brought the gate, let's do it, here's 10 ideas, let's pick one. When she sort of brings me down and says, hang on a minute, let's have a sensible approach. So I guess from our point of view, moving forward in our business, we've got a retail outlet, which is great for tourism, for getting our brand out there. But then we've got a major side of our business, which is the manufacturing side of roasting coffee and then turning that into value-added products. So as we mentioned before, the cold drip, which is our signature product, it's a coffee concentrate in a bottle. So where that's led us to now is at the end of last year, we applied for a grant through the Modernisation Manufacturing Fund. And I guess we were successful with that too. And what that did for us as a business and individually was, the second question in the application was, what's your business plan? And obviously, like all small businesses, it's up here. So that then made us obviously go, hang on a minute, we're ready to go into the next phase of business life. We've got to put some structure into place, which I don't know anything about business, Lauren doesn't know anything about business. So sort of extending from Jenny and Jill with setting up some structure and some boards,
we found ourselves, Lauren's parents live in Adelaide, and I would go down to Adelaide quite a bit with work, and we'd find ourselves each evening having the family board of discussion around the table, involving myself, Lauren's mum and dad, Lauren, and then her brother, who's heavily involved in the property industry. So he's quite used to doing business deals. So we'd sit around the table, have a family dinner, and chuckle these discussions on the table. So what we've got out of that is, I guess, my worry with that business family advisory was there's obviously a lot of love in the air, a lot of passion, more love. Yep, great idea, go for it. But there was never someone to really, smack you on the head and say, hang on a minute, that's a bad idea. So moving on, I think Jill touched on it, is we're now compiling, I guess, a professional board, which are going to be people that aren't involved in our business at all. So they're not going to be our accountant, they're not our financial advisor. They're just people that we feel comfortable with, we trust, and they've got a proven track record. And then our plan is to incorporate the family board to come up with obviously the ideas, usually that I'll put on the table as the manufacturer and the ideas man. We structure that idea, and then we'll take that to our board to make it a reality. So yeah, that's sort of the progression of where we're at.
Okay, Colin. And why coffee? How did you get into coffee? What was the focal point? What was the catalyst for doing that?
So I guess with the building industry, you always find on weekends that you're doing cashies for all your mates and family and friends, which you get a bit sick of after a while. So I said to Lauren, we need a little hobby as a side business. At the stage, so 10 years ago, the specialty coffee industry wasn't huge.
Yeah.
And my brother lives in Adelaide. Around the corner from him on South Road was a coffee roaster, and we used to go there all the time and have coffee. And I said to Lauren, that might be a cool little industry to get into as a little side project.
Yeah.
It's about a 40 grand sort of setup cost to buy a
Yeah.
roaster, get some little bits and pieces. And as it was, we came in at the right time, probably 2 or 3 years before the specialty industry really took off.
Yes.
And here we are today. Yeah.
There's certainly money in coffee, that's for sure. I have a friend of mine. He started off a business which was mobile coffee carts and developed up with some help from some young guys. Developed a coffee machine that could produce a cappuccino style coffee, but using not the roast and ground, but freeze dried coffee and that sort of thing. And it still tastes pretty much like a cappuccino, even though, and it does this very, very fast. And when he was doing that, I thought, Brian, this is not going to go anywhere. He says, there's a big demand for sports events and that sort of thing for this sort of thing. Well, about 9 years ago, he sold a business for $20 million to an international catering company there. So they saw a lot of value in his business there. So yeah. A lot of foresight there, I think, Colin. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the instant coffee. Before I came, the postman delivered a box, and so there's a thing called now specialty instant coffee, using obviously as little chemicals as possible, if none, and freeze dried. And that was $45 for a little jar with 30 serves in it. But it tastes damn good.
Is that right?
Yeah, so I think that'll be the next, once they can commercialise the processing method, that'll be the future.
Good, Colin. I'd like to come back to you later if you have time to talk about the cold drip, but I want to move on to Belinda first up before we do that. Belinda, as you mentioned, mentioned beforehand, you're fourth generation. Wow, this is kind of unheard of in many parts of Australia with family business. The hard part is getting beyond first generation family businesses. Many businesses, family businesses, don't get beyond the first generation there, and so fourth generation is fantastic. And you're a leader, an owner and a leader in what I guess in motor vehicle franchising, and I don't know a lot about your industry. I would have thought it's pretty male dominated there. And you joined in 2012. And I just want to know whether, from your insights, being a woman there, what have been some of the challenges that you've had to face in the industry, but also within the family? I mean, you and your brother, as I understand it, run the business. And has that been challenging, being a woman in the business and a family business and so on? Yeah.
I'll touch on the woman thing first.
Yes.
It's not something I necessarily feel
Yes.
per se. But last year, my brother and I went to our AADA National Dealer Conference, which so the Australian Automotive Dealer Association conference,
Yes.
in which they have all sorts of different information sessions that get
Yeah.
run for us, and it also has lots of different suppliers and things to get ideas. And it was the first time that my brother really had been to anything like that, and it sort of opened his eyes. But one of the sessions they ran was specifically women in the automotive industry, and that there needed to be more diversity, I suppose.
Yes.
And it was quite interesting that half of the room actually immediately got up and when the panel started. Interestingly, the panel was all women, which I found interesting for something about diversity.
Yes.
But one of the things that was said was when there's a board of either directors or just an advisory board, there always needs to be more than 2 women on it, because if there's only 1 woman on it, that person is dismissed,
Yeah.
and you need 2 women for the idea to
Right.
actually be successful, which was something my brother turned around to me and said, I do agree with that. I dismiss almost everything you say. So I do have to respond to myself about that. But aside from that comment, and it certainly wasn't something that I felt going forward, it was something that I felt really important that I proved myself.
Yes.
And not just because I was a woman, I really felt that I had to prove myself in terms of, I was going to be a 4th generation owner of
Yes.
our business. And one of the unique, well, I don't know if it's unique, but I feel like in the business I've seen is unique. One of the
Yes.
unique things that our business had at the time, so we had generational staff as well.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
also have 3rd and 4th generation
Wow.
staff.
Wow.
Not in their droves, but
No.
but it was something that I really felt, and I think most of you would be in, anyone in a family business over a long period of time would know that I grew up in my family business. So the staff that I would be leading were going to be the staff that I have been there since I was 4. Going and getting stamps and
Yeah.
filing and cleaning, and so I really spent a lot of time thinking about what I actually, how I wanted to position myself in that business and how I would be seen, not just, I suppose, for our staff, but also for our customers in general. I never really wanted to go and people assuming, this is going to be handed to you.
Yes.
So I really wanted to prove myself. So I did go back into the family business, which was my dad's idea, and finished my last year of my university by correspondence in Adelaide, which at the time wasn't, it was only really just starting to happen. And so I worked in our family business when I was 21 for 18 months, learned a lot of things,
Yeah.
and Dad wanted me to learn all aspects of the business. That lasted about a month before someone got annoyed and said, no, if you're learning my role, then you can do it then. So Dad said, well, you know how to do that, you can do it. 3 days training. So after 18 months, I decided, no, I really wanted to lead our family business,
Yes.
and I wanted to get experience, and that was something that my family didn't want, and that was a real bone of contention between my brother and I.
Okay. He stayed on in the business?
He stayed on in the business. He's a mechanic by trade.
Yes.
And he was really quite frustrated that I got the opportunity to leave and he didn't, whereas as I got the opportunity, I forced it on my dad. It wasn't something he wanted me to do, and I said, no, I wanted to do it. And I'm so glad that I did, because I wouldn't be where I am today without it. At the age of 21, I set myself a goal to be a rep for either a finance company or an insurance company, and that was my goal moving forward, and I achieved that. And I remember two things quite pertinent over that probably 10-year time period. That my last interview, I had my manager, when he was interviewing me, told me that my resume was terrible, and that if I took the job, would he have me for more than 12 months? Because I had a very short time period to actually achieve my goals. And he said, there's nowhere to go from here, Belinda. If you take the job, this is it. And I did it for 4 years. I loved it. And when my dad did ask me to come back into the business, I actually said no, because I really sort of found something that I really enjoyed doing, and it was a real combination of both. But I did end up, my husband was actually the one that said no, I think that this is something that we should explore. It meant moving from Perth back to the Riverland, and it was something that, despite having a succession plan, wasn't properly planned. And what really threw me was when I had the opportunity to come back, I thought I'd achieved things and I built the credibility behind me, but I really didn't expect that the staff that I walked into, because it was so badly managed, when I came back in, it was kind of like what I'd done was for nothing. That stigma was still there, and that really did throw me for six.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's really important to get out of this, that when you're planning for succession, that you also do talk to your staff before it happens too, because even though I was asked to come back into the business, our staff all thought that I was coming and taking somebody else's job, and I really did have to prove myself.
Yeah.
When I came back into the family business. I didn't come back in as a manager. I came back in as another employee, and yeah, so I did that since 2012. In 2016 is when I actually started as a dealer principal.
Wow. So the whole idea of family business succession is an important one there. And I agree totally with you. There needs to be a strategy around this there, and how you're going to do that. Who's going to take over when, and what position are they going to, what role are they going to take? It's interesting, in your situation, there's two examples here of two different approaches that families sometimes adopt with their family business, with the next generation. There's one line of thinking that says, no, if you've got children, keep them in the business. So we train them up through the business, and then they know all about the business, the culture is right, and then we pass the baton to them and them. And then the other way is there'll be other types as well, but another approach is what happened to you. You start off and maybe know a little bit about the business, you grow up in the business, but then you leave and you learn about business from a different perspective there. And then you come back bringing new ideas into the business and so on. And from what I've seen in the research, and maybe Jill would like to comment on this, I think there's probably strengths and weaknesses, pluses and minuses with both approaches. But Jill, would you like to comment there on that?
Yes, I think there are a number of things that have come out from your comments, Belinda, and it's a great case study, but there are so many more options as you identify. I mean, we're talking about the who, the when, the how, but there's nothing linear about those questions, and we have to keep revisiting. So you talked about communication and talking not only within the family but to the staff, which is really important. I don't think it'll overcome the feeling you had when you came back, but it would at least pave the way, and it might make it smoother when you come back. So I think that communication is really important. It's also important the timeliness of it and the re-communication, because you can talk to an 18-year-old about coming into the business, and Susie will say, yes, I really want to do that, and it's they go off to university, they get into another job, they love it, they then don't want to come back. Susie doesn't want to come back, or whatever. Or the reverse. Susie will say, there's no way I'm coming into this business. Go off to trade school, to art school, to work, to whatever, and then decide later on, hey, that wouldn't be a bad idea. So it's always re-looking and re-communicating and having those ongoing discussions, and having the openness and the flexibility to keep rethinking and touching base with your children. It's not only the children who you're thinking about in terms of succession, because it might be that for whatever reason, none of your children want to come into the business, And so you've got to think about the non-family members, the employees there. How are you going to develop them? It's not only developing the children with the appropriate skills and capabilities, but it's also the non-family members. And you talk about generational members of staff, and many family businesses are very fortunate to have that situation. And so that the only way that that's going to happen is if you do keep them in the circle of discussing, and so they feel welcome to actually have that. The other thing about succession is not only management succession, which we talk about most, but ownership succession.
Yeah.
And we need an ownership structure that primarily you want an ownership structure if you're an SME or smaller business that will enable the financial security of the incumbent, of the retiring member, to have that financial security without a drain on the business. So obviously it's very important, but it doesn't always get planned for adequately. And the other thing about ownership succession is to decide, well, how are we going to structure this?
Yeah.
You know, are all our children, we've got 4, equally going to have shareholdings? Or is it only the person who's decided, for whatever, with the skills and capabilities that comes into an executive role, that will have ownership? Those things need to be aired. How do we accommodate, and this is more where the lawyers get involved in terms of wills, etc., but how do we accommodate financially those who are out of the business in terms of the will, etc.
Yes.
So there are lots and lots of complexities about that. But the ownership structure, I think your other example that you haven't really touched on quite is that's the pruning of the tree, which is a form of succession, ownership succession. Do you want to touch on that, Belinda? Because you've done that well.
Yes.
Well, I'm not saying it wasn't hard.
And actually, we're still doing it. So it's something that we have, in some degrees, what you've just touched on and what you spoke about as well, that aside from my brother, so there are 5 cousins into a cousin consortium, and in my generation anyway, in the previous generation there were different ones, but everyone with the exception of my brother all left the dealership and forged their own careers, and of their own volition decided that...
and do they still have equity in the business? No.
No, they didn't have equity in it to start with.
Okay.
So I've had to buy in into our business.
Yes.
And so it was my dad and my uncle that were running the business as the 3rd generation, and it was obviously something that was discussed, probably not so much with us.
Yeah.
And that is very, very important to realise is that often these things don't get spoken about. So my dad's plan for me was to become the dealership accountant. That's what I was going to be. So Linda, you must do accounting in 12, you must do accounting in university. I'm not an accountant. I enjoy some aspects of it, but certainly not what I do on a daily basis. And when I started expressing that to him, well, that's fine, Dad's role for me changed. But it was, I suppose, simple in one way, that was just my dad and my uncle, and they did have a succession plan, but it was never really discussed with us. It was very interesting going to we built a multi-million-dollar dealership in Bury in 2010, or my dad and my uncle did anyway, and I wasn't even at the actual opening. Very, very interesting dynamics that go on there. But so the tree wasn't so much, it was pruned for us to a degree. Where it got very interesting in when I set foot into the business in 2012, in 2013 my uncle sat around a sales meeting and realised there were 5 Rosenthal's in the room and only 3 salespeople, and said, we're not properly structured right here.
Right.
And he decided that he wanted to retire now. To the best of my knowledge, my dad and my uncle did have a succession plan, they didn't follow it.
Right.
And that, I suppose, is a key learning, that even now in 2020 we're still trying to unravel the financial side of the pruning of the tree.
Yes.
Even though my dad and my uncle have not been in a business since 2016. So interestingly, probably what you're not aware is my brother actually about 2 months ago decided that he didn't want to be a director and shareholder of the business anymore, just in a random meeting, and we've just had to very quickly work through that. We didn't even have a partnership agreement in place because we'd only really taken it on in 2016 and didn't expect that any of this would happen immediately. Now, luckily, that's been quite simple because we've just been through it twice.
Yes.
Followed the same formula.
Yes.
But it has created very in difficult times already, such as the loss of one of our major franchises and COVID and all the things that have gone along with it. It has created complexity that really didn't need to be there because we could have planned for this when we do have an advisory board structure as well.
Yes.
It was something that I think it was assumed wouldn't take place. So the business is now 100% owned by my husband and I.
Yes.
And 100% managed by my husband and I. But it's still going through the one of the things that I find very stressful in my role is that not only am I running my business, I have 33 staff, and we've got all the outside pressures, but I'm also acutely aware that if the house of cards come falling down, it's still going to come falling down for my entire family.
Yeah.
Because
they'll wear the stigma. Yeah.
Well, it's not the financial.
Yeah.
So the buyout of all family members wasn't something that was particularly well planned, and it wasn't something that was particularly well. It was executed well, I suppose, in the sense that everybody sort of got. There was no sort of argument.
Yeah.
But it was something that we're still dealing with today in 2020 and don't have a full understanding of how everything actually works. So we have one accountant, and I think that that's also a key learning, is that I think it's natural, and our external accountant is one of our advisory board members, but it's got to a point now that he can't represent 5 parties because he's at the point now he's probably not giving anybody any advice because he's so conflicted.
Yeah.
Not due to him wanting to, but it's just the nature of the beast. So I think at some point you do need to branch away and get your own separate advice, get your own separate
Yes.
accountants, so you can get the full picture to a degree. But it's really difficult because at the end of the day, my dad and my uncle's retirement plans aren't really my business, but they are my business.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to draw that line in the sand and say,
Yeah.
okay, well, how much of it needs to be private? How much of it do we need to know so we can plan for the future?
Yeah.
There's still properties that are owned by people, by my family, that now they want to be bought out of those properties. It's just expected that, okay, well, Belinda and Andrew have the business, so they'll do that.
Yeah.
And it's something, and I can understand how that would come about, but it's saying, okay, well, how do we actually manage this to the expectations of your retirement plans versus, we don't have an infinite pool of money. We need to be able to work this out. So it's things we're still working out today in 2020 that it really could have been worked out long ago.
It's easy to talk about it in hindsight. I mean, when we started off today, I talked about how family business is the most complex form of business, and for the nature of the family issues in the family dynamic, as I refer to them, but also as new generations come in, it's even more complex there. Becomes more complex as well. The issues become more complex, and so as you rightfully say, great if you can plan ahead and think ahead in there, but often you don't. It's all uncharted waters there.
It is.
And, yeah.
I think one of the complexities about our business is that the car industry has also changed, and I think that would be fair to say of any industry.
Yeah.
So the plan that they made in 1992 drastically changed when they went from running 2 relatively smaller businesses in Berry and Remark to move into one massive business, not in terms of turnover, but one massive business in terms of its overheads.
Yes.
That was something that was forced upon them by Holden, which is kind of ironic now, but it was forced. The actual words were, how much do you value your Holden franchise?
Yeah.
Well, we've all found out the answer to that question today, but at the time, with 26% market share, that was the main reason why that business was successful. And the point in which Holden forced them to make that change was a point in which normally you wouldn't want to be taking on the levels of debt that my dad and my uncle did. So my key takeaways there would be that the communication between the next generation, you really have to be very clear
Yes.
about, okay, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, this is how it needs to move forward, this is how we plan on retiring, this is how we plan to pay for this debt.
Yes.
Is this something that you want a part of, as opposed to, we want to start thinking about retiring, can you please come home? We've got a problem with this department, this is your expertise, can you fix it? Which is essentially where how it was put to me.
Yes, ma'am.
Not just like that, but yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So one thing I'd like to you raise, which I'd like to bounce off the ask the others here as well. So going forward to the next generation. First of all, have you thought about having a succession plan yourself? And is part of that succession plan what I mentioned earlier is that in some families they say ownership of our family business can only be by bloodline descendants there, and we're not interested in spouses taking an equity stake in our business because we want to keep the true values of the spirit of our business. Could I just go, Jenny? I don't need to pick, I need to be the closest here. I'll go around and ask Callum and I'll come to you last, Belinda, but do you have a succession plan? And have you given any thought about bloodline descendancy, or are you happy for spouses to actually, take ownership of your business once you pass the baton to your children? No.
The likelihood is we won't pass the baton to our children because they've all forged their own careers.
Okay.
Part of the reason for having them come in onto our advisory board is really, should anything happen to Eric and myself,
Yeah.
so either together or separately, then the business can continue to the stage where then it can be sold.
Right.
So to have people who've got some understanding of who we are, how we operate, and who can step in as a short-term measure is very crucial to the viability for selling.
Yes.
We acknowledge that we will be selling the business rather than handing it on.
Yes.
Because farming is hard.
Yes.
And brand building is hard. And it's not everyone's cup of tea.
No.
So with that, we are devoting our efforts to building all the things that you need to sell a viable business, so turnover, profit, making sure that debt's paid down.
Yes.
We've structured our business so that it can be sold in parts if necessary, because part of the brand value lies in the values of Eric and myself.
Yes.
So we very much built up a reputation based on not only us as individuals, but the product that we produce, and our ethical background, I think, is the one way to put it. We actually have our objectives on our website, which state that we are all about protecting the environment, working within communities, serving the community, looking after our customers, looking after our suppliers.
Yes.
It's an ethical mindset. So should we sell the business in future, we need to be able to find not just someone with the right amount of dollars, because we could have sold it many times to, the Chinese, for example, given our name, but but we have to find someone who reflects those values, because that is fundamentally part of the brand.
Yes.
And the brand is where the value is. Anyone can produce wine.
Yes.
Some people can produce better wine than other people.
Yes.
We've always striven to make very good wine. We like to think we succeed.
Yes.
But what distinguishes it from Grange or Hill of Grace or any other good brand out there is our brand, and the values that reflects. So that's quite intangible.
Yes.
And so I suppose that's one of our strategic aims, is to build that intangible so that it has real monetary value for sale.
Good, thanks, Jenny. I mean, it's very important, like in any business, when you start off, it's all about the owners there. And if you want to have something to sell at the end of the day, you've got to take you out of the equation
Correct.
and the brand to stand by itself and the systems and everything else that you put in place, so that you've got something to sell
Correct.
there. Yeah,
Yes.
very important. So yeah. Thank you. Callum, I don't know whether you've got any children or you're thinking about having children. If not, I mean, have you given any thought to a succession plan? Do you intend passing your business to the next generation?
Yeah, so no children as yet. They're probably on the cards.
Yeah.
I guess realistically, we're in the process of putting into place, a business structure that's solid. We're getting to that manufacturing scene, so we need to implement a lot of SOPs. So if you did have someone come along and they wanted to buy it, we've got systems in place that are bulletproof. I guess that SOP stuff comes, or standard operating procedures, comes into place too for expansion. So if we have new employees come on board, etc., then there's systems there. I guess we've always been conscious of that we've actually got under the Arosto banner, there's, I guess, 4 products. So we've got a retail cafe, which is the old fire station. We've got our cold drip as a product. We've got our roasting arm of our business, and then we've got a coffee liqueur, which is another arm of the business. So we've always got the options there to move one of those products on if we needed to, or if we did find that we wanted to focus on one of those wholly and solely, then the other 3 are saleable products. And I guess also having in place, the way we do business is we sort of get a bigger piece of machinery than what we need, sort of overextend ourselves, but then we've got the capacity to move forward quicker and easier.
Yes.
And also having that vision of, do we need to have like really in-depth business plans? Well, why not?
Yeah.
We probably don't need it just yet, but if someone come along for saleability wise, or if, let's be realistic, something happened to us health wise, then that option is already there, ready to roll. So yeah.
Thanks, Carl. Thank you very much. Joel, what about yourself? You're a second generation family business owner. Is there going to be a third generation?
No, so we actually we sold half the business. So my parents started it and we took it over, and there was a conversation about that happening. But I took the decision, my brother and I in particular, about 5-6 years ago, which was that we don't really want to do this for the rest of our lives. And there were sort of 3 big drivers that we decided, led us to the decision of wanting to sell the business. And that was, one was we wanted to create a wealth creating event, right? So that money wasn't an issue for the broader family, and the business was flying, so it could attract a premium. So the timing was right. The second was wanted to create the opportunity for us to physically leave the business, and I was never going to leave the business having so much equity in the business still. So I wasn't going to put in professional managers and be a director guiding, because I just didn't have faith that I would get the better result and I'd be leaving a lot of money on the table. And the third is I wanted to get some more experienced people around the table that were ready for the next phase of growth. I fundamentally think that it takes a different level and calibre and experience of manager, director, CEO to lead the business through the different cycles. And there was the early sort of turnaround phase, startup and growth phase my parents were part of. Then there was a plateau and a turnaround stage, my brother and I, and then the scaling and through to this exit. And the next play for an organisation like our, be the size and the scale we are, is it's acquire or be acquired, right? And so, it's a different level we need to be operating at. And I wasn't really up for the whole challenge of doing this for the next 20 or 30 years of my life. I wanted to do other things. So for that reason, we took that decision.
Yes.
And we've sold half the business to private equity, which means that we're working together with them side by side, to generate another event that will happen in the next few years.
Thanks, thank you. And Belinda, can I just go back to you? So is there going to be a 5th generation owners of your franchise?
Well, if you ask my daughter, yes.
Right.
My 6-year-old's already asking me when she gets to be the boss.
Right.
So But we've taken the approach in our business that it's always for sale. Our business is, I suppose, a little bit more complex, that our franchisors have to allow us, they get a say in who we appoint as dealer principals.
Yes.
And who we're even able to sell our business to. So, you know, they do all get a say, and being multi-franchise, we would need all three to agree.
Yes.
So that was one of the reasons why I took the approach that I did.
Yes.
Because they actually took quite a dim view of the third generation.
Yes.
There were quite a number of third generation dealership operators that did quite badly, and so it was actually almost a hindrance to be generational.
Yes.
So I think, it's hard to tell what the future's going to hold.
Of course.
But if one of our daughters, we've got three, so a 6-year-old and 2.5-year-old twins. So
Yes.
if any of those or their partners wanted to take it on, then they would need to be approved, and they'd also need to have the financial means to buy in. Andrew and I will be the first generation to wholly and solely buy into our business.
Yes.
The generation before me, so my dad and my uncle, they inherited half of it and purchased the other half, and the generation before them inherited the business. So it's a big beast, even though not to the scale that
Yes.
John's talking. It's large, it's complex. You need to have the ability to be able to fund the operation, selling cars. We've got $5 million worth of what we call floor plans. So whoever would take it on would need the ability to be able to get funding for that in itself.
Yes.
On top of actually buying into the business. So it's an interesting question. In answer to whether or not it would just be whether you would allow a spouse, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that there are other generational businesses that we have benchmarking meetings that we
Yes.
go to. They were run with Holden every 6 months, and there are generational businesses in those.
Yes.
And many of those actually in the group that my dad was in, they had mainly daughters. And most of those dealerships, those 20 dealerships, have been taken on by partners as opposed to
Yes.
the daughters themselves.
Just picking up on that, I know in some industries, like for example in the liquor industry, what happens sometimes is that trying to get the next generation exposure to different new ideas, innovations and that are happening in other businesses. And wanting them to keep the family spirit there, that they do like an internship, they swap their children around to different family businesses so they can see what the other family businesses are doing and whether they can bring some of those ideas back. And so it's almost like, it's probably not exactly what you just said, but I hear it detect a hint of that there.
We do that too. So
Okay.
it's something that we would have to work out within ourselves.
Yeah.
But it's certainly something that. So I know that. One of the other dealerships in provincial Adelaide, we call it.
Yes.
When I was a teenager, the partner of one of the daughters that was coming through there, so they were their third generation, he actually spent 6 months with my dad. He was a real estate agent by trade, so
Yes.
and learning about our business, because at the time our business was sort of the benchmark of the group,
Right.
and that ebbs and flows.
Yes.
And we still spend not so much internships, but many apprenticeships aren't in the family business. They'll go to another business. So one of the so Rosewarne's in Kadina. They're a 5th generation. They're the oldest Holden dealer, and Tom, the now the dealer principal, he actually did his apprenticeship at Claridge Holden in Adelaide. So that is something that does happen, and I think that there's definitely something to be said for that too.
Yes.
I certainly really enjoyed all of my time whilst not being on an internship per se, working for other dealerships.
Yes.
Yes. And I think that it was really useful, especially now. What the dealership that I left when I was 21 is very different to the dealership that we run today, in the sense that yes, we're a family business, but we're expected to be run by, we're not governed by corporates, but we kind of are.
Yeah.
The hoops that we have to jump through and the things that we do. It's very important to have, in my opinion, outside knowledge, and I think that that's where my brother does feel that he missed out on that opportunity to a degree. So.
Thanks, Belinda. Jill, do you want to say anything at all on that?
No, well, just a point that, because you've gotten a very enlightened panel, obviously, and there have been some great examples, but one of the things that's happened in the past, and I think still does happen, is that some of the incumbents of multi-generation family businesses feel guilty if they want to sell it.
Yeah.
And there's more of a recognition now that try and put away the guilt and the emotional side of it.
Yes.
And it's just as good often to harvest the wealth that you might pass on to the next generation, and then the next generation will enable, if they want to, start their own business, and that's called serial family business. But you know, that's just a research term. It's not a very good term, is it? Because serials associate other things. But anyway, ongoing. In other words, they have it in their blood, and you've harvested the wealth, etc. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to pass down, and it can be sold off for very good reasons. Yeah.
Just touching on that too, that guilt, that's very real. That is the number one reason why I actually ended up coming back. That's why, you know, I originally said no. I thought about it and said, how do I sell a 110-year-old business, not me personally, but how do I allow it to be sold?
Yes.
And I felt that guilt that I had to go back. Now, I've actually gone and started my own company on the side.
Right.
You're
moonlighting.
But it's something that is very real, and I think that it's really important to realise that it might be 110, or in our case 111-year-old business. It doesn't mean that it can't be sold.
Yes, yes.
You've also demonstrated amazing commitment apart from the guilt. So
yeah. Can I ask, I've got other questions, but can I ask the floor, you know, or those out there in the digital land, do you have any questions at all of the panel? I'm conscious of the time is sort of moving on, and I'll probably hold the floor here asking all the questions.
I've got no questions on the digital
at
the moment.
Okay. Well, we are coming to the end, I feel. I mean, it's a bit warm here. I don't know if the air conditioning is working, but so look, I might ask the panel then, are there any last comments that you'd like to make at all about your experience as a family, you know, as a family business entrepreneur? Jen, any words of wisdom are there, or maybe if I could ask, you know, or challenges that you particularly face as a family business entrepreneur?
Look, I'd like to say one of the most rewarding things. Eric and I work really well together.
Yes.
We've sort of got our own areas of responsibility and our areas of overlap. But to work together means that we get a different perspective on the same problem.
Yes.
And so that means we've been quite creative in some of the things that we've done.
Okay.
It means that we've actually been pioneers with a lot of what we've done with our brand.
Yes.
Because we haven't been constrained by somebody else's idea about what you should or shouldn't do, or how you do it or don't do it. So certainly with branding and with product placement, for example,
yes,
we've been hammering away at it for nearly 20 years now. And well, like Maggie Beer. Maggie Beer was an overnight success after 35 years of business.
Yeah.
So we figure we've got another 15 years to go. Thank you. Sorry. But no, it's been very rewarding. It's very challenging, particularly when you take so much responsibility, and as I said, you don't just have skin in the game. You're fully committed. So if you make a mistake, you stand to lose everything. But that, in some respects, is the thrill of the ride. It's like a roller coaster.
Yeah. And Jenny, can I ask, does it create extra challenges for you on a personal level with your husband and that? So, you know, like in non-family business, you'd each go off to work in different directions, and you come back and, you know, overnight or whatever it is, and spend time together. Here it's 100%, 24/7 there. Is that, you know, and family, that's what family business entrepreneurship, I guess, is about. There's this blurring of the personal and the business side of things there. Does that create extra challenges, or you've managed to deal with those if there were?
Oh, the current challenge is tiredness,
Yes.
because we have 2 busy times of year. One is vintage, and then one is October.
Yes, right, right.
And so I think it keeps the relationship fresh, because
Yes.
he'll be getting up early and I'll be sleeping in, or
Yeah.
I'll be going to bed late and he'll be asleep already.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But we haven't been very good at taking personal time
Sure.
until maybe the last couple of years.
Yes.
And now we're at a point where I can say, well, I'm just going to get an employee in for this particular day, and I don't care whether I'm paying them Sunday
Yeah.
rates or not.
Yeah.
I need that
You
time
need
for
time
me.
out. Yeah.
And the same with Eric. And we work really well together, not just in the business, but just
Yes.
as a family. So
That's
yeah.
great. That's great, because you know it can, I guess, you know, put extra stresses
If we didn't get on well
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
a couple, then
Yeah.
it would have potential to
Yes.
force, you know, to crack a marriage.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
we know we're stronger than that.
Yeah. Good to hear, Jim. And Callum, what about you?
I guess going back to like myself and Lauren's
Yeah.
previous careers,
Yes.
I watch it quite regularly. Is YouTube. Denzel Washington does a speech on YouTube, like an inspirational speech.
Yes.
And before you go to bed, turn the lights off, crank it up on your stereo. And
What's it called? What's it called?
if you just Google motivational speech,
Okay.
Denzel Washington will come up.
Okay.
And one of the things he says in there, this sort of relates to our life, is everyone always says you've always got something to fall back on with our carpentry and our physio. And in his speech, he touches on that about, you know, you've always got something to fall back on. But he touches on, let's not fall backwards, let's fall forwards. Because at least if you fall forwards, you can see what you're going to hit. Which makes sense in life. So
Yeah.
I'll finish with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's a
Yeah.
question.
Oh, yes, Tom. Yeah.
No, I've got a teaser question that's bothering my mind. Thank you. They touched on the key to what I think the success of the business is its taste. As a customer, I have had good experience and I come back.
Yeah.
And I spent 50 years growing almonds, and when we came here, we found some soil with pipes going past it that wouldn't grow almonds, and we planted grapes. So I'm never going to call myself a grape grower.
Right.
I'm retired.
Yes.
60% of Australia's wines come from hot climate, and the country does its best to try and deny they produce
Yeah.
wheat.
Yes.
Similar wines and a few others across the country do it really well. The industrial wine is appalling in the main, and I'm
Yes.
glad there's a lot of customers that like to drink it primarily
Yes. Yes.
overseas. My question is there a niche in 919 and Arosto that says there's a passionate farmer, winemaker and marketer, there's a package, the same sort of skills in Arosto. I know it's very individual at this point, but there are innate skills that we were dealing with in the 90s selling grapes. We got told to produce better grapes.
Right.
We said, well, we're not making any money. We're not going to cut the tonnage down for the same money.
Yes.
They come up with some incentives.
Yes.
80% of the growers hit those incentives in 2 years.
Right.
They said we can't afford to pay enough money. But about the same time, the funds come in and turn it into an industrial business.
Right.
These guys are turning. We've got the best palate in the world, I think, on coffee.
Yeah.
I've never had a good cup of coffee in America.
No.
Never. Not even
I'm
close.
with you 100% there.
So these people are doing things
Yes.
that are they're packageable, marketable somehow.
Yeah.
I don't have much experience beyond the word.
Are you saying how do we scale these businesses up and
Scale it, teach it.
yeah.
Yeah, define it even.
Yes.
I think you had a crack at it, but if you haven't done these things, I don't like all of 919 wines, I don't like all of Rossler's coffee,
Yeah.
but some of the stuff, I don't like all of any other wineries' wines.
Sure.
Some of the stuff they make is absolutely,
Yeah.
I'm back at every time.
Yes.
But there's something in the success of businesses that isn't on the slide you're talking about marketing. I think there's something in there.
Yes.
Excuse me.
No, Tom. Thank you. Would you like to comment or
Jenny.
Callum or Jenny?
Yeah.
You go.
Probably my little, great comment, thanks Tom. I guess we pride ourselves in consistency, which I think leaves that speaks massive amount. That, you know, if you get a good coffee every single day from that cafe, well, you're going to come back. If you get a good bottle of wine every single vintage, you're going to form a great trust for that brand. And I think just passion. I hate the word passion. I did an interview years ago called Pass the Passion on ABC, and I freaking hated it. Anyway, but I think, and I work closely with Eric and Jenny as well for our coffee liqueur product. And I know when I mainly deal with Eric because he's the one manufacturing it, and you know that when you deal with him, he is absolutely dead set passionate about his product, the finished product, the flavour. And yeah, we're in the business of flavour, and I think flavour is hard to hide. You can try and mask it with chemicals and sugars and all sorts, but I think that both our businesses have got a good, we just want to give the best possible product to that customer. A, I don't want complaints, and B, it's just great seeing a customer have a smile on their face and come back day and day or week and week. So yeah, I think it's quite simple, but there's a lot. There's a lot of a build up to that point, especially from us. I travel overseas every year to source our coffee. Last year was Brazil, year before Colombia, year before was Guatemala. Giving you access to some of the most unique coffees available, which some people like and some people don't, adds to that story of the brand as well. Yeah, Jenny?
Yeah.
Part of what we have written into our business objectives is that customer experience is the centre of everything that we do. And we do that in a sustainable way. So when people come to our winery, they have a unique experience with exemplary customer service. When we make wine for our clients, it's not just, give us your grapes and take the wine away. It's that point of contact at every step in the process to make sure that they're comfortable with where they are, that they're going to be happy, or they get the right advice to get the right product out at the end. And it's about fostering those relationships. Customers must be the centre of your business, and people want something that tastes good. Now, it's not as profitable in $1 per litre sense to produce our product, because we're growing at lower tonnages. We're actually getting less extraction during the winemaking process, and then all our input costs are far more expensive because we're not buying them at scale. But that's, in some regards, it's the old-fashioned winemaking philosophy, and I don't like that word because philosophy should not be part of your business, otherwise we'd be philosophers. But it's the old-fashioned approach that you make the best from what you've got. You try and bring out the uniqueness of each vineyard or each vintage or each variety, and we still have that marketing behind it. So we have differentiated our products into our reserve range, which is mainly from our original Glossop block, the 919 block. That is quite different viticulture there than our Ella Semmer's range, our Ellis Semmer's range is for a very specific, ethically minded market. So, we draw up an image of who we are making the product for, so that we get it right from the word go. So our Ellis Semmer's range, for example, we said we know that the younger generation's very ethically minded. They're about a sustainable planet, doing things with minimal waste, organically, and all the rest of it. So that's what we feature. With our reserve range, we know that we have customers who like something a bit more traditional. Now, we don't have traditional varieties, but everything about that range is more traditional in its approach, from grape growing through manufacturing through branding. So it's about putting the customer first. And who is our customer? Well, we have the two customers. We've got the ethical customer, or what I call the ethical customer, and then the more traditional customers.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you. Belinda, Joel, did you like to have your last closing comments at all?
I think one of the biggest challenges, there's a lot of challenges in family business, but one of the biggest challenges for us is almost like what you've got on the board. How do you professionalise the family business and still make it feel like a family business to the consumer? I'm not sure if that's also what you're getting at.
Yeah, I'd like to see the opportunities these people have gained for themselves, that they're limited in how much they want to expand, or but what they do is expandable.
So in our business, that's also, whether you buy a Mazda 3 from us, or you buy a Mazda 3 from a metropolitan dealership, from a big dealer group or a small dealer group, or just a family business like ours, the product is the same. For us, the tricky thing, and one of the things that we've learned, is we're a family business, and we want to be perceived as a family business. It's one of our strengths and one of our weaknesses. The customer is at the centre of everything that we do. We don't run our businesses like a corporate does. We're not ruthless. We're not perfect. We don't expect our staff to be perfect. They're people just like us. We sort of feel our way through as we go. And I think that that's one of the great things about dealing with a family business. And one of the things that makes it unique is that you can come and speak to me, or you can come and speak to the owner, as opposed to, if you bought a car from AP Eagers, you can't speak to the CEO, you can't speak to the board of directors if you've got a problem. But it's, I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is how do you manage your staff to give that ultimate customer service, but also have how do you deal with the customers when we do make mistakes, because inevitably we do. And I think that everything we do with heart. And one of the things that we don't want to do is just hire a fire, because we're also in a local community as well, and it's one of our biggest challenges, I think, and it's something that I think every family business to a degree needs to overcome.
Sure.
Yes, I just think it'd be worthwhile picking up on that. You mentioned earlier that I'm on the Family Business Australia board.
Yes.
It's a membership organisation, Australia-wide, and we've just gone into New Zealand. And the members are small, very small, medium, large, and very large. And just what you're describing and your question, this sort of discussion happens a lot. And what they're aiming to do, as Belinda mentioned, is identify what it is that's going to help their end product do well, what's going to help in terms of the customers. Passion, I don't like it either, but give me another word that describes what we're talking about. Passion, hard work, energy, that commitment of the values that you've established the business for, or that great-grandfather established the business for. How can we ensure that that passes on and reaches out to the end? Because the CEO or the MD or the family name is not necessarily going to be connecting all the time, as you can, but that's what they want to do. So it's a very common thing to happen. How do we bottle that and help other businesses that aren't doing as well? I think that's the million-dollar question that people talk about all the time and have those discussions about. So it's been great to hear from all the perspectives here.
Yeah, look, indeed. It has been great to hear. Joel, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, sure. just, I guess, in conclusion, from my perspective,
Yes.
I'll forever be grateful for the experience I had in a family business. It technically still is to a part. We have 50%. We're still directors, but not like it used to be. Right? We own the whole thing. We're running the whole thing day to day. You feel incredibly proud to be able to build something substantial together with the family, make an impact on society, the industry, and also take care of the family overall. It's something that is very humbling and we're very proud of to do together. But I think in saying that as well, when asked the question after I left the business as an executive, I stepped down as CEO a couple of years ago. Would you do something with the family again? And I think my answer is no. And it's nothing to do with my family. Right? I love my family, but it's the same thing, which is would I do something with my friends? And the answer to that I've come to is also no. And maybe it's just me, maybe it's my management style or the way that I interact around a board table or whatever. But for me, I just I think that the potential conflict and the damage it could do personally, those conversations you need to have, the issues or the arguments or the challenges you can have, I'd rather keep it separate from now on. In saying that, I'm an investor now. I'm an SME investor. I back high growth businesses. I'm very open to looking at family businesses. I'm talking to one right now that's looking very promising, and I'm very excited to talk to them going through these challenges, because I think that with the right input you can navigate them successfully. And as I mentioned earlier at the start, there are a range of strengths which can really propel the business, if harnessed, to achieve over above gains.
Thanks, Joel. And that's interesting, because that last comment about investing in a family business, because there'll be some families who'll say we want to keep the family 100% ownership in the business. And so what that means is that if there's opportunities there, that they can bootstrap the business as much as they can to take advantage of the business, borrow as much money as they can to borrow the business, and as the business starts growing. But if there's not enough investment there to take advantage of other opportunities, and the business will plateau out. And then the only way to do this, to get the business going again, is actually to get outside equity there. And that's where it comes into where I started about talking about, is family business about ownership, or is it about control? So you think about News Corp. There's no way in the world the Murdoch family, Rupert Murdoch, could have actually built the empire he's done today without bringing in outside investors. The challenges, however, is how do you still keep control of a business? And that could be a topic for another time, because you can keep control with 5% of the business. They're owning 5% of the business. It depends on how you structure the business from an equity point of view there. Too much detail to go into today, but on that note, I think we'll leave it here. And I'd like you, if you wouldn't mind, giving our panellists a round of applause. I think there's some fantastic insights, and thank you, each of you, for bearing your heart and soul here. Perhaps talking about some things personally that you maybe hadn't thought about that you were going to talk about, but it was great because it made it very real to hear. So if I could just put in a little plug for ThinkLab here at Loxton. We're, as I mentioned earlier, we're very focused on innovation and trying to boost regional development here in the Riverland and the Murrayland region for that matter. In addition to these seminars, we've got forthcoming is a range of courses and programs about business development, commercialization, and the like. How to develop ideas if that's what you're working on at the moment. You've got some ideas to start a business, or it could be for an existing business, such as one of these businesses here, where they're looking for new ideas to actually take that business to new heady heights there. And this involves, the sort of things we provide. It's just not the classroom experience, but we back that up with one-on-one mentoring, facilitation through experienced entrepreneurs, investors and so on. We'll have these sorts of people coming here to participate in those programs. And the other thing I mentioned as well is that from a prototyping point of view, you know, we've got a bit of expertise in the 3D printing area, and we intend making our skills available here for those people who they've got an idea for a particular widget of some sort, and they want to build that sort of thing. Then we may be able to actually help you develop something tangible there using our 3D printing, rather than going down, say, a casting route and pouring liquid metal into there. We can provide prototypes from a plastic point of view, and we've done this. We've worked with business industry in Adelaide in doing this. And then eventually you may want to get to a metal prototype, and we can help you do that through with our contacts and our network with 3D printing in the university, where we print a whole range of different metals. Anyway, we're certainly very open to people who may want to go down that route and explore the 3D printing with us. Look, it's certainly been a pleasure today for me and our team here. This wouldn't have happened also without Zrinka and Eloise there. So you put your hands up there. And of course, once again, this would not have happened without PIRSA support, who had the vision to try and go forward and help us set ThinkLab Loxton up, which is part of our ThinkLab network overseas in Singapore, in Europe, New Zealand, and certainly in Adelaide. So just in closing, if you'd like to have a chat a little bit further with us, any of us, any of the panel members, I don't know whether they're going to rush off or not, but please stay. Feel free to grab a tea or a coffee with us if you want to have a chat with myself or Zrinka or whatever, or Eloise. Please stay around. If not, if you're taking off, safe travels. Thank you very much for coming.